The first scheduled Apollo mission ended in tragedy before it began, right on the launch pad in February of 1967. With the loss of the crew that morning, NASA sent its best and brightest men and women back to the chalkboard to put Americans in space before the end of the decade. Apollo the board game, with our provided review copy from Buffalo Games, seeks to match the intensity and challenge of those early days of American spaceflight with a cooperative experience for 2 to 5 players. Designers Jonathan Gilmour and Sarah Addison combined to bring us this challenging yet gorgeous and rewarding tabletop experience. Let's launch into it. Past the game's spot-glossed box cover, we are going to find a rulebook, which is one of the best I've ever seen. It's got lots of full-color illustration, good examples of how a turn works, and the breakdown of every player phase. Just outstanding. Next up, we have the game's 2 boards, the first being the Apollo moon mission board, and the second being the more easy starter Gemini mission board. Next up is the flight crew mission control double-sided player screen, as well as the mission control board. Finally, we have, getting into the problem with this box, is the flight control board, and as you can tell, everything's just sort of jam-packed in here. There isn't really a good solution for storing all of the game's tokens. There's bags to house the dice, tokens, and cards, but everything else just sort of gets jammed in here, which is really a bummer because everything in this box is really great. There's wooden identification tokens, really great dice, and plus and minus tokens that don't really have a space to live. The highlight of inside the box are these 2 mission packs. The game takes place in 2 different missions, the Apollo and the Gemini mission, and the cards that are specific to each one live inside these delightful plastic astronaut ice cream bags. The problem is, nothing goes back in here well. As you may have noticed, I've kind of thrown everything on the table, and that's more or less indicative of how it's going to go back in the box. But the good news is, it plays really well. And let's set up for a couple player game, and I'll show you how it works. Apollo's setup is pretty agnostic of your player count, as what we have here is an asymmetric cooperative game. One player takes on the role of mission control, playing from behind this control screen. The rest of your astronauts will be playing as if they're on board Apollo or Gemini's command module, charged with completing not only the mission, but also performing at least 2 science experiments, diverting their focus even more. Depending on which mission you're playing, you'll take the mission-specific cards and tiles out of the adorable space food packaging and set them up here as I've laid out. Mission Control gets this player screen with tons of information laid out on the back and uses it to cover up their board, which will denote the system status of either Apollo or Gemini. Mission Control also reserves 2 dice, 1 of each color for themselves, as well as the game's crisis cards separated into stacks. Finally, take the game's experiment cards and shuffle them, keeping the top card a secret from your astronauts. On the other side of the planet, the astronauts are going to get the remaining control board, the remaining 10 dice, and a nearly useless but awesome turn token. Apollo plays in rounds, separated into 2 phases. Of the moon? The first phase is the roll phase, which begins with the astronauts inquiring to mission control as to how many dice they're allowed to roll. This is based on the current life support status of the ship. Mission control reports to them their current amount, and they get rolled and then placed on the flight damage board according to number only. 1s through 5s are placed starting from the left to the right, and 6s being used to fill in gaps as decided by the flight crew together. Once that's done, the crew reports back how many missing spaces there are in each system, and Mission Control tracks that as damage on their board. For any dice placed in the bonus token section, the crew earns themselves a plus or minus token, which will prove invaluable as the mission progresses. At this point, Mission Control starts a 4-minute timer, sadly not provided in the box, and the action phase begins. Now, the crew is racing against time to assign their dice to the various systems on the board in shuttle to attempt to fulfill the mission objectives. Each individual action taken by assigning dice, either by value or color, will move the mission marker up a spot as the shuttle makes its long way through the vast void of space, so ensuring that each choice is optimal becomes a delicate dance of timing. The game ends in a loss if the astronauts fail to complete a mission stage before the token passes the marker. However, astronauts in Mission Control must also be vigilant about the flight control system, as objectives can't be completed if that system reads 3 or less. Additionally, if the ship returns to Earth without completing 2 science experiments in the case of the Gemini mission, or 3 in the case of Apollo, then the mission is also considered a failure. But hey, at least you survived. If it's not clear by now, Apollo as a game can be soul-crushingly difficult. You're relying on ever-fickle dice, and while you can earn these coveted tokens to help you out, there's a lot working against you here, time being the foremost concern. If the 4-minute timer ends, you don't even get to finish what you're doing. You just hard stop and begin a new round. I highly recommend the following changes to help your first game. Play the first round without a timer, and then play the second round with an 8-minute timer. That should give your players some time to learn what each of the spaces do without having to push hard against the clock. Trust me, this game is going to be hard enough. Also, something to keep in mind is that you can assign dice to the current mission stage, but you can't complete it. Then those dice are locked for future rounds. You don't get to re-roll them, so if you're going to put them on a card, make sure that you don't need them for repairs or any other use in the meantime. As I mentioned before, it's this balance of very scarce resources that serve as the primary point of tension in Apollo. So, does it work? It does, but you have to embrace the chaos. Know that this is Pandemic turned up a notch. You have all the time in the world to plan your turns in that game, and while the deck will change those plans, you can regroup and try something else in response. That luxury is completely missing from Apollo, and the game's dice will often be out to get you. Knowing exactly what you need to do and how you're going to do it is even further complicated by the hidden information behind this mission control screen. Only Houston knows the exact details of the science experiments you're asked to perform, and while you can throw a ton of dice at it and hope that some stick, that's not the efficiency NASA demands. Resources are going to be used to ask Mission Control exactly what they need, and they have to be tight-lipped, only giving you one piece of information per request. While I get why this rule is in place to keep the game from being too easy, I wish there'd been a thematic reason for it. As it stands, it serves to make the game feel almost adversarial, as Mission Control has all the information, but won't share it until you pay up. To make things worse, you're also fighting against your own ship. As things break and fail, systems will go into crisis. Mission Control can notify you of those with these awesome little flip-up lights, but they often force the Mission Control player into solving a physical puzzle. They'll roll 2 dice, which will help them unlock circuits with doubles, and then they have to use those circuits to connect the corners of the circuit board, eating up even more of your precious time. The astronauts can throw them an extra die, but then that's one more die they can't use to do their thing. None of this is to say that Apollo's a bad game. Far from it. We enjoyed our time with it immensely, but you gotta know what you're getting into. Space is brutal, and without cool heads and keen eyes, you won't survive it. You can always home rule the timer if you need to, and I'd encourage you to do so if you find you losing games far too often. Losing is painful, and unfortunately here it can often be through very little fault of the players. If that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, well, Spacecamp isn't for everyone. While there are issues with Apollo, ultimately it's a thematic, tense game that can be played quickly enough to easily accommodate another round if tragedy should strike. There's also plenty of space, if you'll pardon the pun, for homeruling some of the more difficult traps. Let's go through our checklist before I give you my final thoughts. In the box, rulebook clear and non-gender pronouns. Apollo's rulebook is one of the better ones I've seen in a very long time, with lots of clear examples, easy to follow descriptions of the game's phases, and no gendered pronouns. Buffalo Games did an amazing job with the book, and other developers should stand up and take note. Iconography clear. While the totality of tasks available to players can be overwhelming for beginners, especially given the 4-minute clock, it's easy to see what's what from looking at the board, and the provided tokens are large and clear. You're almost always looking for either dice values or colors, and both stand out well. Packaging well done. A large misstep here stands out as a glaring issue. I'm particularly good at putting things away, but this box has me absolutely stymied. I've never once been able to get the lid closed completely, and while it's not a game-breaking problem, it's a large annoyance for me. On the table, good representation. None of the in-game art depicts any obviously gendered characters, with even the box cover being a full-suited astronaut. Component quality. High. From the game's digital dice to the flip-up warning markers, everything in the box feels great on the table. The pieces that are just so-so still feel like they'll hold up over time, but there are some absolute standouts that elevate this game's wow factor. Replay value. High. While co-op games can vary in this category, since Apollo's relying almost completely on the rolling of dice and your ability to manipulate them, you're sure to have differing experiences every time this box hits your table. Fun to lose. Sometimes. The flip side to the replay value point I just made is that because this game relies on dice and the very specific ways you use them, it's sometimes painfully obvious that you're going to lose and there isn't anything you can do about it. Thematically, you can imagine yourself coasting on the dark side of the moon with no radio contact and not enough speed to make the turn back home, not enough fuel to burn, knowing that you're going to die in the cold blackness of space, and all you can do is wait. That got dark in a hurry. I loved my time with Apollo, despite the issues I've mentioned earlier, and that's mostly to do with just how sweetly this game is themed and the asymmetrical nature of its gameplay. Being able to tweak the difficulty by increasing or decreasing your round timer is going to be a huge part of fine-tuning your tabletop experience here, but no matter how you fly, this one's well worth your payload space. I'm Nicholas, reminding you to help protect the game population, always leave your cards.
Hey everyone, if you enjoyed that video, please hit that sub button and check out all of our other offerings at goodluckhighfive.com. And please consider becoming a patron of the channel at patreon.com/GLHFmagic and help us keep making reviews, videos, and podcasts for as little as $5 a month. We're also always looking for new games to review, so if you make games or you know a company who does and wants to have their game reviewed on Good Luck High Five, please reach out to us at glhf@goodluckhighfive.com and we'd be happy to take a look. You can follow me, Captain N the Game Master, on Twitter and Instagram at CaptainNGM, and follow the channel at GLHF Magic. Remember, please shop at your local game store whenever possible. Until next time, I'm Nicholas, and good luck, high five.